Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, I'm joined by Paul Schaffran, who is the Executive Assistant of Managing Director and the Head of Strategy and Youth Development for Borussia Dortmund. Paul, thank you for joining us on the call as well.
Thank you very much for having me.
We've been chatting probably for about half an hour before this call, so it's strange to make it more formal and do these formal introductions as well. But I really appreciate your time. And just for everyone on the call, this is Paul's first podcast in English, and he is a native German, so his English is better than mine. I will put that out front as well, so you won't need translation for him, maybe for me. But thank you again for joining us, Paul. And it'd be good to get like an overview of how you got to your position, bearing in mind when we organised this podcast and first met, you were head of sports science at Borussia Dortmund Academy. So it would be good to get an overview of your role and your position and how you got there, if that's okay.
Yes, of course. How many times have we got? So it's about a 2 hours podcast. I will start from the beginning. No, really appreciate to be here. I try to make it short, but give a little bit of overview because I think it's pretty uncommon role and an uncommon pathway I got. So
Go for as long as you like. It means the listeners have to listen to me less, so it's all good
okay,
you speaking rather than me. So all good.
okay. So I started study sports science. Did my bachelor degree in sports science, very much focusing on training and exercise science, and the same also in my master's. I was really on track to go into performance diagnostic. That was pretty much my intent when I studied sports science, and then I got different interests when I studied, and I make a trainer license in kite surfing and windsurfing and football as well, also in alpine skiing. So I was pretty much try to get a holistic overview on the different sports, but also in different aspects of sports science. And then I was really excited to give my knowledge into the next generation. So my focus very long was to stay at the university as a researcher. Then there was an offer after I finished my master's degree to make an PhD in sport psychology. And to be honest, till that point, it was not really an option for me because sport psychology wasn't a very special part of my study. But I thought it will increase my portfolio and also it will increase the holistic view on sport. So I was 3.5 years at the sport psychology department doing my PhD. And in this time, my first child was born. So the priorities again moved a little bit. So the timelines increased a bit, and close before I tried to finish my PhD, there was an offer from Borussia Dortmund, and they made in cooperation with the university where I did my PhD and where I studied before, and tried to make a very deep cooperation between the youth academy and the sport faculty. The who was it at this time? It was the project coordinator. He came over to me and said, "You would be perfect for this role for coordinating all the projects because we want to focus on performance diagnostic, but also on personality development and some kind of talent identification. You have this kind of a holistic view on it. Would you like to become our project coordinator for the next 3 years?" And I was, could that be a part? Because my focus at this time point was some on one side of the family and on the other side going into a more research career. But I was really excited about this option. And yes, I have been there for 3 years. So that's from 2018 to 2021. And then after 2.5 years in this position, the head of academy from Borussia Dortmund came over and said, "What you are doing on the university side is very enlightening and insightful and inspiring for us as a club, but we need someone who translates these knowledge into our football practical environment. And we don't have this kind of constellation within the club. Would you be interested to build up a sports science department into our club and come over to BBB side?" And again, I thought it was, have a child. The second child was on the way, and I was not even done with my PhD at this time. But again, it was just a next option to increase my portfolio and to increase this holistic view on football. And I said, yeah, I would really love to do it. What exact is your intention? So what kind of a role should I should I bring into the club? And they said, to be honest, that's not our expertise. Could you please create what from your perspective is most beneficial to a club from a sports science perspective? And I said, if I look into your club, we have a lot of sports scientists in the strength and conditioning department. So we already had some PhD sports scientists in the youth academy who was responsible for athletic rehabilitation, physiotherapists, but he's very much from a physiological point of view. And I always see my role since 2018, since I joined this club in this first period, more from a holistic point of view. So it's about how do we create training based on what kind of criteria do we scout our players? How is the transition phase created? So I was pretty much like even the executive assistant, or I became the executive assistant of our academy director in these 3 years from 2021 to now. And then the idea was to being this summer to be the head of strategy in the youth academy, even with our academy director, and being like the right hand of him, giving him these strategic ideas of how to develop the club. And then he was promoted to become the managing director of sports of Borussia Dortmund. So he goes 2 levels up. And he came over and asked me, I would like to take you into the CEO level and to be my executive assistant in this role as well. But our idea was to make the next developmental step in the youth academy. I would really love to be part of that development in the club and the youth academy as well. So we created, and I think from my perspective, that makes a lot of sense. We created a role that's on the one side creates this strategy for the whole sports organization, of course, with all the knowledge that our sporting director, our technical directors, and all the other crucial persons in the first team, on the first team level had, but bringing that from the CEO level through the first team into the academy and build some kind of a bridge from the CEO level down to the foundation phase. And that's pretty much my role since 1st of June.
I find it really fascinating, and it's great. First of all, it must have been very hard to say no to Borussia Dortmund. You have your family commitments, you have life. I can see why you accepted it as well. Like, how did you find balancing studying, family, and the job as well? Because you obviously said yes to all of them.
And the one thing is, meanwhile, I have 3 children. It's pretty much when I started my PhD, the first children arrived when I started the cooperation with Borussia Dortmund from university. And the second child was born, and when I started the head of sports science in 2021, the third child was born. So even if I get the next opportunity from a career perspective, a child arrives.
Number 4?
So,
yeah.
No, it's done. We're done. I'm pretty fine with 3 children, but 3 is perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah.
I don't want to have 2, but I don't also want to have 4. The one thing, to be honest, the one thing that I have to skip for the moment is my PhD, because it's between family and practical topics I have right now. And you can imagine that in this role right now, it's not a 30 hours a week. So it's a lot of topics, a lot of very interesting, insightful topics. And I have to skip for the moment the PhD, and I'm pretty sure I will go on my PhD later on, but that's something I have to pause and just make a break for, I don't know, maybe the next 2 or 3 years till the smallest child is in school, and I have some kind of more space to go on that pathway again.
And I think it's not like you stopped education. Obviously, we were talking before, you've been doing like CPD alongside this. So like, was it through the European, the ECA association that you've been doing some other awards as well?
And that's again another. So my academy director 1.5 years ago, he said, "Oh, the ECA will start a new program for academy directors," and he already had this idea in mind that I became the new head of strategy in the academy. I didn't know this at that moment, to be honest, but obviously he had a plan. And he said, "Okay, I would like to send you over to this ECA Academy Managing Program. That was a 9-month program, very, very, very interesting. A lot of perfect networking, 27 or 28 academy directors from all around Europe, from all different levels. So it's very interesting to see it on Manchester United, Borussia Dortmund, Sporting Lisbon level, but also to see it how smaller clubs deal with similar topics that we have and how they find very creative solutions with less of budget, but other ways how they deal with it. So that again was for me was very interesting to develop in these more strategic education again. So yeah, that was from October last year to July this year, and 1st of June I started a new role. So it was very tough in the last 9 months, and it is very time consuming at the moment, but very, very interesting.
I think like it's great to hear like how strong the relationship you have is with like some of the key people. I remember we were in Groningen together over in the Netherlands, and normally like when you go to scientific conferences, it's all sports scientists, academics, and you brought your academy director with you at the time, and I don't think any other academy director was at the World Conference of Science and Soccer or football. So I thought that was really fascinating how much he bought into this world as well.
I mean, that was pretty much the idea that he came up with 2021, that he said he wants a guy that brings this scientific way of looking at things and evaluate processes into the practical environment of a football club. And we talk about a lot of strategic thoughts. And that was one part where he said, I know it will be, from my perspective, it will be very nerdy. I, as an academy director, won't be able to dive into all the topics the way you dive into. But for me, to get a feeling in what kind of external factors you try to bring into the club is good for me to get an overview and a feeling of your kind of perspective. And so he was over 1.5 days, I think, from the 2 or 3 day conference. He was with us that is perfect. I think that's some kind of mark how we try to evolve our perspective and look on things. And he's a former player, so most of the former players would benefit from different perspective in their career after ending the professional career. Yeah,
because I suppose like you've talked a lot about the communication between key stakeholders at the club. I suppose it'd be good to get kind of an overview of the initiatives and sports science specific initiatives that you guys are running at Borussia Dortmund Academy. If that's okay as well.
Of course it is. I mean, one of the first things that I came in was to say I analyzed it from a university side. So in the first phase of my career at Borussia Dortmund, I analyzed that we have this issue, like we all know it. It's relative age effect is a huge topic, and also that we have a lot of early developed players in our youth academy and less late developed players. So the first thing that I came up to was I would like to measure the biological status of our players more accurate. So I brought into an ultrasound handwrist measurement system 2.5 years ago. So even a half year after I arrived in the head of sports science role, and we measured all of our players from under 9 to under 19 2 times a year. And that was some kind of a starting whistle, where my idea never was to say, we have to make some kind of a ratio. So it's a 25, 25, 25, 25% in every quarter. And we have to make these kind of that much of players that are early or late. That's never my idea. The idea is more to develop the practitioners and to make them think about what are the consequences. And if you have them on board and they, from their perspective, without me intending anything, they want to have more late developers in their environment, and they want to work with players with a huge potential and not with a huge current performance level. That is better at the long-term process than just to say you have to deal it like this, and on the other side there's maybe some kind of, what does this guy want to tell us? So we have 10 years experience in coaching, and he comes over and tells us how to select our players and how to develop our players. So what we started 2 years ago was then exactly that. We measured the players, and I just give the report into one of our coaching meetings with all coaches from under 12 to under 19. I said, that's the current situations we have. What do you think is the consequence at the end of the pathway? And then the moment the under 15 coach came over and said, wow, I always thought about that is be close to that, but how can we deal with it? What kind of consequences should that have? And that for me was perfect, because he came over with a question how to deal with these kind of data and how could we bring that into a practical context. And then we started to develop ideas. And the first year was just to say, okay, let's make 1 day per week under 12 to under 15 and train in biobending groups. And then bring our scouts into this constellation and say, please rate our players in a chronological training on Tuesday and also in our biological training on Monday. Do you see any kind of differences in there? And after 1 year, these kind of coaches that came over, who is a very experienced coach, he's more than 30 years in the club right now, he came over and said, came to me and said, if you agree, would you support me to become the head of sports or head of coaching for under 12 to under 15? I said, from my perspective, it's a perfect idea, because then there's a practitioner who goes on developing and evolving this idea of biobending and this idea of bringing the potential on a visible level for coaches and for scouts as well. So yeah, now he's the head of coaching for the last 1.5 years, and I see at my point right now, I don't have the time to go deep into biobending week per week how it was a year before, but it is still developing, and that's for me the perfect sign. So if I would lead the club right now, I would be pretty sure that the topic of biobending will not just survive, it will be evolve in the next years. And that's the perfect sign for me that I did something right in the last 3 years when it comes to this kind of project.
I mean, we've known each other for quite a few years now, and I've been really fascinated with how the implementation of biobanning has been within the club as well. And obviously, it's a key strategy by the sounds of it for you guys as well. How have you tried to help, like the late, early circa kind of players within their development? Do you have any different strategies that you adopt? Obviously, you have the different training nights as well. It'd be good to hear a bit more about that. But do you provide additional training or resources for them to help support their development?
I mean, to be honest, the first year, I think the benefit for the players was just smaller. The bigger benefit was for the coaches. They evaluate training sessions from under 12 to under 15 all together. So we created some kind of an BVB understanding of how to train and develop players in these 4 years. And yeah, we tried several different ways of how to train. We started with athletic blocks at the beginning of the training, where we put them based on their long-term athlete development model. So players that are in front of the growth spurt, they are more on coordinational aspects. Players that are within or after the growth spurt, they are more on strength aspects. But we see that from a scientific point of view, that might be valuable. But from a practitioner point of view, we lost too much time on this one training session per week. So what we do right now is that we not only based on, because at the end, for me, it's not, biobending is not the key when it comes to development. It's one crucial aspect to bring players in other circumstances and to make the practitioners see them in other environments. So we very early decided that it's not just about biological age, it's about what does the player need at the moment to develop a mindset and a skill set that will help him when he comes to an adult level. So that's the main question for all of what we do in pretty much all of the academy. What does the player need at the moment? And if we see that a late developed player is perfect in the age group where he is, because he is from a technical or cognitive or tactical understanding point of view, he's so much ahead, we will keep him in that age group. But if we see that he starts to change the way he is as a player, so he's not more confident to go in a dribbling, to go in a duel, to play long passes, to shoot on the goal, okay, we have to decrease the challenge level for him and maybe bring him in a younger age groups or more in biobending context or whatever. And the same in the other way around. So if there's a player that is early developed, we have a lot of early developed players through the last decade that have a crucial impact on our team success in the under 16, under 17, and even in the under 19. But then at the under 20, under 21, under 22, their skill set and their style of play is not even efficient anymore because it suffered from physiological advantages. So we have to bring them earlier in an environment where they are still forced to adapt to what makes them efficient at the end of the pathway. And that's the general thought of how we look. And I think that's not just from a scientific point of view, because I could say, okay, no, we go straight by their biological age, but that's not my intention. It's about what's the best for the players in the development of the player.
It's really fascinating because it's great to answer all those questions, and it's great that it's a multidisciplinary team approach to answering those performance questions as well. But how do you actually go about quantifying if your methods are successful, shall we say?
The next, maybe I go a little bit further, because the one thing that we thought about is how can we, exactly what you said, how can we measure if that is efficient or it's not efficient? And the first thing is a subjective thing. So how does the player get a feeling of, is that beneficial to their development or is it not? And we know at the beginning that biobending, or even in our society, even going down to younger age group, I think it's the same in school. You can say it's a better learning environment for you if you make, again, the same class. For the child, it will be some kind of a decrease in their trust of themselves. So it's hard at the beginning if somebody tells you you should learn, train, or whatever with younger children. That's pretty hard. So we pretty much want to break this up for the players and for the parents. And that's why we decided at the beginning that we didn't tell the players and we didn't tell the parents that we will start biobending. We said that's team-based, or that's individual-based training around different age groups. So after 8 weeks of training, I came over with the head of coaching, going in front of our parents and tell them, that's what we did the last 8 weeks. What's your intention and what's your feedback on what you think right now, and not what you think up front? And that's the same for the players. They don't even ask about, is that beneficial or not at the moment. They say this session on Monday is free kind of playing, because we always play in small groups. So it's 1 versus 1 up to maximum 4 versus 4. We want to bring them in a lot of duels and a lot of shooting situations, a lot of dribbling situations. And they say, we can be like pressureless kids in this moment. We can just train, we can just practice, we can just figure out where we are at the moment, and it's not bring into a bigger team tactical context this one session. And I think that's a crucial key to get an understanding and also an support from the kids to that idea. And if we have new players right now, the parents ask at the beginning, what's this Monday session? Oh, that sounds very perfect. And if I have talks with parents at the end, pretty much all of them, 95%, that makes a lot of sense to make these kind of session 1 per week. And it's not like, we miss 1 team training session per week. No, it's a very crucial session in the development of a player.
That's the thing. A lot of like the buy-in within football has always been around that subjective kind of feel. And once we get parents and coaches on board, that's like a huge benefit to a program. Everyone needs to be going in the same direction. Is there any way, like objectively, you try to quantify that as well alongside the subjective, or is it more?
I forget the second part of your question.
No, it's okay.
When it was in Russian answering.
Subjective, objective, okay.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, the one thing is, how long does players stay in our environment? So how long do we, from different perspective, from our scouting perspective, from our head of coaching, and also from our coach's perspective, say this player has the quality and the potential to stay at Borussia Dortmund. So we want to increase the transition from one age group to the other. But again, there I can say we have to increase the transition weight by 10%. And then they say, okay, we have to take this player, but it might not be valuable, and an external player might be better. That's not my intention. The intention is to say we have such a good developmental pathway that it's hard for external players to become a higher level than our internal players. That should be the key question. If a player starts his development in under 9 at Borussia Dortmund for 5 years, then there should be very few players in Germany that are better, has a better potential, and under 15, and we have to bring them up into our environment. So at the end, it's an objective to measure the transition weight from one age to the other to be sure that we are on the right pathway. But it's not the criteria upfront to say we have to increase the ratio of a transition from one age to the other, because I think then you trigger the wrong point.
It's really good. And the transitions, it's always been a fascinating one because when you look at, so again, a couple of my master's students and PhDs have gone, okay, here is the difference between a under 12 to an under 15 and the difference between early and late matures from a technical or a physical perspective. It's really challenging when you have those kind of great players within an academy, knowing when to push them up and when not to as well. So it'd be
Yeah.
good to hear how you kind of like manage that expectation of coaches, of parents, of players about when they transition or the demands of transitioning from a under 12 to an under 13 or transitioning from a under 16 to the full time program, for example, because the training loads are different, the match demands are different. It's all the physical and technical demands are increased potentially, or they're
But
just
I think
different.
that's it. Yeah, but I think that's a little bit different to the UK. We have all of our players being in regular school program up to their age of 18. So even in the under 19, half of the players are still in a normal educational in a public school system. They became full-time football players just from an age of 19, 20. So that's not even a big topic within the youth development pathway. Within the academy, it's more a topic when it's the transition from under 18 to under 19. So within the last age group or into our under 23. But yeah, these expectations of the environment, of agents, of parents is different. And I don't know if the guys from the UK knows the constellation in West Germany where we are. You have such a dense structure of high class academies. So if I talk about an circle of 100 kilometers around Dortmund, we have close to 15 top academies. So it's Cologne, it's Leverkusen, Schalke, Gladbach. So there are so many, which makes it perfect from a competition point of view because it's easy for us to organize high quality games in all age groups. But from the other side, and that's something that the German Federation is starting to work on, there are a lot of transitions from one club to the other, even in the youngest age groups. So there are so many players that are in the under 17, and they had 3 to 4 different academies, especially in West Germany. So, and I think that's that comes from this kind of more selective perspective on youth. So if there is a player that has not the potential, you can pick another player from another academy and replace him. And we at the end at Borussia Dortmund, as the biggest club in West Germany, for us, it's always easy to pick the best players or the what we think is the best players, or maybe it's the most performance players at the moment. But that is not most of the time. It's not the player that had the most potential. So it's easy to replace a player by another player. But the moment you commit yourself to work with players for a longer time, there's a different attitude from the whole environment. It's from the head of coaching, it's from the coaches itself, it's from even from the player, it's from the parents, it's from the agent. In the moment we say this player stays here for the next 5 years, no matter what, it's a different attitude how to work with a player. But you have to understand, it's for us, it's different. Like for example, Atletico Bilbao, they have this kind of attitude and culture to say we want players from our environment and we want to develop players from the region. We also want that, but there are 10 other academies, and we as Borussia Dortmund try to make a change that we have players quite long in our system. But that's a typical German topic. So I think Germany, when you compare the top 5 leagues in Europe, has the highest amount of different academies that even the professional players that are in the first Bundesliga reach to their youth developmental pathway.
Yeah, and like even when you look at all the stats and the figures, Borussia Dortmund is still one of the top producing European academy teams in Europe, not just for players going into their own system, but players turning professional outside of their own system as well. So you guys are obviously doing something very right as well, and you've obviously got a good cohort. Like it's very it's interesting. We were talking about it before the call as well, but you mentioned about the competition as well, and I mean, how have you found other clubs kind of embracing like biobanding? And obviously, you had the event last week as well, which might be a good topic of discussion as well.
That's interesting because two of the clubs are influenced by a former colleague from my side from the same university. So he has been in Cologne before, implemented biobanding there, and is now in Werder Bremen and implemented it there. And I think Bayer Leverkusen make a huge step when they brought someone, and the current director of academy is from the Netherlands. So they brought some new cultural and very visional aspect from another country. And if we look over the barriers to the next countries, I mean Belgium, Netherlands, and several other countries, they focusing more on how to increase the potential of their countries because they are smaller countries. They have to. In Germany, the Germans a little bit have the problems. We have so many players in our system that we, for a long time, thought it should be enough to make just some of them reach their full potential, and then we have a perfect, top of the pyramid.
Which again, like I suppose that's where kind of ensuring you have like those innovative sports science initiatives, you have those processes in place to ensure that you can both do the subjective monitoring and the objective monitoring as well.
Yes.
Like, so how have you guys like not just within Borussia Dortmund, but within like the local German kind of institute you have within the northern western region of Germany? Like, do you do any like tournaments or competitions where you'll try to implement some of these strategies, like biobanding, for example?
We even do it. It's not just biobanding. I mean, we fight it for. When was it? It was 2 years ago. No, 1.5 years ago, when we have a very, very late developed players. He was close to 3 years late developed in our under 15, and he has to go to under 16. And the federational rules are you can't play as an under 16 player even in the under 15. So we go to the federation. Might there be an how do you say it's an
Like exceptional circumstances.
exceptional circumstances to say is he able to play? Please, is he able to play in under 15? Here's the sonic bone, so here's our hand push measurements. It's pretty sure he is very, very late. And if we don't let him play in under 15, his chance to become a good football player at the end will be very, very decreased. And unfortunately, it didn't work. So we didn't get the exception from the federation. But what we put on is a process that the federation, they always thought about it for years before. And I know there's a university in the south of Germany. They try to push that topic a lot. But at the moment that a player like Borussia Dortmund comes in and put a lot of pressure on the federation, they put a task force to create regularies how this should be possible in future. And right now, 1 year later, we have a pilot phase all over Germany where this kind of exceptions will be standard. And next year, so from 1st of July, the next season, it should be possible all over Germany that if there is a really late developed player, he will be able to play in younger age group. So I think we are on a good way in Germany. But we are a big country, so it might take a little bit longer than it is in smaller countries.
Yeah, but that's brilliant to hear. Again, like you've used kind of like the sports science initiative, so with the sonic bone kind of ultrasound biobanding measurement or maturity measurements, I should say, you then used it as evidence to support a player's development, which is crucial as well. And for that player, hopefully, again, the player will be 16, 17 now. Hopefully, it's had an impact on their development positively as well.
Yes, and that was the case, especially in this player. So we decided, nevertheless, we don't get the exception from the federation. We try to let him train in under 15 for that year. We let him play in all friendly games and in all under 16 games where it's possible for him and makes sense for him to develop a good skill set. He played in under 16. So the first year under 16 was pretty hard for him. And especially the first 8 weeks, we are in very dense exchange with the parents, with the players, how he feels all the time. So it was tough at the beginning. But right now he's in our under 17 squad and he is not only he's still, from my perspective, the most potential players, but he's still one of the players with the biggest performance. So right now he's going closer from a maturity point of view. He comes closer to the other players in under 15. He is closing the gap that he had before. And we see that, especially for him, it was worth it. It was worth it to make some kind of an uncommon pathway, to create an uncommon pathway for him.
Which, again, if he becomes the next great player, then it
Yes.
shows you the worthwhile case.
But I don't want to put that pressure on him, to be honest.
No,
that's why I never name him. I never want to put this pressure on him, because at the end it's a child, and only why he is a late developed player doesn't mean that the expectation should be higher. But at the end, of course, if he becomes a first team player for Borussia Dortmund and plays Champions League, that will be a perfect role model for the players in the youth academy, of course.
Well, it just shows you like the scientific strategies work. You've been monitoring the maturity status with something like sonic burn, for example, ultrasound scans to track his physical development. Then you obviously had like all the technical and physical measures, I'm sure, through the different systems to objectively quantify that. Like, and I suppose, like, how do you know if is it more subjective or objective, where you go, okay, he's top performance, or do you have data that you utilize within the age group that shows, okay, he's developed from under 15, now he's under 16. We see that he's actually benefiting like objectively as well as subjectively.
I mean, we also, when it comes to the first thing that we analyze is what kind of output and challenge level does players have at different environments. So I decided then 1 year later, so I mean, you should know it. You're from PlayerMaker. It was 1.5 years ago, I think, or maybe 2 years ago, close to 2 years ago. We decided
to talk about it.
I know. So I will make this part. So 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, we decided it would be very beneficial to make an objective analysis how the difference between biobending and chronological age groups make other outputs on the density of actions of players in the training. So we compared a 4 versus 4 in chronological age groups with a 4 versus 4 in biological age group over longer time. The same with 7 with the 7, 9 with the 9, 11 with 11. So different drills, different game formats. And we see that these late developed players, they have a lot of more context, a lot of more success, a lot of more won duels, a lot of more successful passes, a lot of more using their weak foot when they play in biobending groups. So these kind of, I think always is kind of an bring them from time to time in different challenge levels. If you are over challenged for a short period of time, it will make an adaptation, of course. If you'll be under challenged for a short period of time, it will make an adaptation. But if you're even too long in one of these constellations, if you are over challenged all the time, every player will start to try to be efficient in the game and at least not be inefficient. So what we realize in players, and that's we have objective data on that, but we also have then all of our videos, so which is objective as well. So how does the style of play from these players developed over the last 3 months, for example? So how often is he going into an offensive duel? How often is he try to play a ball that breaks a line? How often is he using his weak foot, for example? And we compare that and we say, how is the transition into the normal chronological age group game? And when we come to these players that I talked before in our under 17, 2.5 years ago, he was nearly never going in duels, never breaking the line with passes, never going into dribblings. He was never going into defensive duels. So he's always, I don't know if you say it it's not forechecking. It's like if you try to steal the ball before the opponent gets it to the foot. So it's not about going into the duel. It's like before you.
Yeah, trying to predict what's happening and then.
Yes.
Is the English word.
So. Yes, so there's a specific German word, so I don't know how it is in English. But that's the strategy that he start to develop, and we say that will never work when he will be 19, 20, or 21 and play with our first team. Never. So, and we measured that. So, and then we see the increase, the ratio of strong and weak foot increased for more than 15% over the last 2.5 years. the number of dribblings he takes, the number of line breaking passes he takes increased in comparison to the team. So always in comparison, how many is he doing compared to the same position in the match situation. 2.5 years ago, he was like 50% of the others, for example, and now he's 150. So of course we have this kind of objective measurement. Thus the style of play of the player changes through our way we train.
No, I'll be honest with you, Paul. That's been really insightful conversation. I really appreciate your time as well. Like I just noticed the time as well, and that's a good thing that when conversations are flowing. And I promise you, we'll try and keep to 30 to 45 minutes, and we're now pushing to the 45. So, is there anything as like a summary point to kind of like sports science within Borussia Dortmund or your kind of philosophies that you'd say to like summarize the conversation?
One thing I would like to add before I come to a summarize is we already had a lot of sports science experience in the club. So when I arrived, we have almost 25 persons in the club that studied sports science on different levels. It's our head of communication. It's even the Edin Terzic as the head coach during the last 2 years. He studied sports science, the assistant coach of the first team, a lot of coaches in the academy, a lot of strength and conditioning coaches. So I think it was easy for me to bring ideas in because they are an open mindset or they understand what I was generally talking about. And at the end, if I would like to summarize it, it's not like only the Borussia Dortmund, it's the way I feel it all the time. It's I want to sensibilize and inspire people's working close to players or even players itself to change their view on what's a good developmental environment for players. And the moment when I got the feeling I could go out of this context and the idea still survives or still involves, I made a perfect job. And that's what I don't put some
Pat on the back.
pat on the back, but that's what the feeling that I got right now when it comes to biobending. If I would be out and I would leave Borussia Dortmund, this topic will survive. And that's for me, that's the best feedback I can get.
Thank you, Paul, and appreciate your time. If anyone wants to get in touch with you outside of the podcast after listening to this, is there any way via email or LinkedIn, or what's the best method to reach out?
I think it's both. Search me on LinkedIn, Paul Schaffran, or write me an email at paul.schaffran@bvb.de. So both possible, of course.
There you go. Thank you very much, Paul, and appreciate your time.
Thanks. And I hope you work with my English. I know it's not perfect, but I try to be better.
It's been fantastic.